I want to acknowledge my what are we, mini track chairs. That's what we are. So Utpal from IBM, Amar from Cisco, and Heather from MasterCard. We came together, as we come together each year, to do a submission to see if we can get a mini track accepted. And the ISSIP organization, which is over 1,000 members strong, and membership is free to individual members, and there is a sliding scale for institutional members. So I hope you'll all consider going to the ISSIP.org site and considering joining us for all of this. But each year we make a submission to HICSS, and we've been fairly successful at getting our submissions accepted. And what we've settled on for the last couple of years is this idea that we are unique in that we bring together academic and industry partners. And so we've actually settled on a track that is a practitioner research insights track, and a non-academic, someone who is not making their daily bread by being a member of the academic community, has to be on the paper. And we actually had to turn down some papers that didn't make that hurdle. And this is the one place where we really focus on both the academic and the industry partnerships and the data and the insights that can come from that. And our expectation is that in many ways, the industry insights are ahead of the academic ones, in that we're spending so much time going through the peer review process and all, that we may be overlooking great things that are already out in the world. And so this is a place where we get to share those insights. And so thank you to my co-mini track chairs. I really appreciate your work. And I'd also like to, share our agenda here. We're going to talk just a second about the introductions. This is the order that the papers will go in. And as I mentioned, we will allow everyone to just share their own slides, run their own slides. Try to stick to the 10 minutes. I'll be giving some signals if things are going awry, and about 2 minutes of Q&A during the talk or at the end of the particular talk. And then we've left another good amount of time for discussion at the end. Wanted to just make this point again. So the purpose of the track was exploration of science and technology to real world service science innovations. And these could be practitioner reports, case studies, best practice examples, many other things. We're very open to both the topic and the methodology, but the key being that it's coming from real world in practice efforts. And our advisory board members who helped us with all the reviewing process that got us to the point today. So thank you to all of them. And with that, I'm going to stop my sharing, and I look forward to the first paper with Haroon, Paul, and Gerhard.
Good morning.
Great.
You cannot start screen share with other participants. Okay.
Yeah, I've got.
That's all right.
There we go.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. Remove all those heads. Okay, I should be on full screen mode right now.
You are.
Okay, good morning. Happy New Year, everybody. Our first topic today is managing AI bias executive perspectives. And I have my colleagues here, Paul Maggi and Gerhard. I'll have them go ahead and introduce. I know they've already done the introduction, but formal introduction, a few seconds. Paul, why don't you go ahead?
Yes, hello everybody. I know some of you. I'm getting to know all of you. It's very pleasant to see your faces this morning. I wish we could all be in Hawaii. This group of people, these three people, all of us have been studying digital transformation and particularly digital leaders for probably going on 5 years now. And I think you're going to find our insights about how these leaders affect and can manage better the terrible problem called mitigating bias or removing bias from our analytics, particularly artificial intelligence. And so Haroon's going to take you through some real world examples of that in just a moment.
Gerhard, why don't you speak for a few seconds?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm very happy to be here in this group. And I'm from Aachen University of Technology in Germany, and head of research at one of our major institutes. The institute is FIR, Institute for Industrial Management. I'm in research for over 20 years. I started my, let's say, academic career in the research of service industries, and then focused more on the transformation of traditional industry into service-based industries. And yes, so this led us here as a team to explore digital transformation in depth for about the last 5 years. And actually, I am one of the former presidents of ISSIP, the International Society of Service Innovation Professionals.
Great. Thank you. And myself, I'm Haroon Abu. I'm the Vice President of Digital Data and Analytics at Bell & Howell, headquartered here in Research Triangle Park, Raleigh, North Carolina. For the last 20 years, I've been leading technology-enabled business and digital transformation. And I've been working with Paul and Gerhard for the last 5 years. So introduction, as we all know, artificial intelligence applications are taking the world by storm. But at the same time, as these solutions take center stage, they're also coming under intense fire as being biased, right? So we describe the actions taken by 3 successful digital leaders that we interviewed from large corporations to how do they overcome this issue and ensure that the resulting decision information is fair and explainable. As Paul mentioned, it's part of our broader topic of building trust in organizations through digital leadership. And their advice is part of a much larger study that we conducted, how digitally mature organizations separate themselves from digitally developing companies. And there's a website that we keep it up to date with all of our recent research. And the book, it's called patternsof digitization.com. You're welcome to go take a look at it. And we have a whole blueprint there about our research and ongoing work. One of the executives that we interviewed as part of this exercise is Deborah Leff. She's the former global leader and industry CTO of data science and AI at IBM. So machine learning algorithms are easily tainted. Sometimes an unconscious bias of the engineer writing the model creeps in, and sometimes bias comes from the training data with an unintended result. So as an example, we talk about Apple Card, which all started with a tech executive realizing that he was granted 20 times the credit limit of his wife, despite having joint assets and filing joint tax returns. Right, so the Goldman Sachs, the issuer of Apple Card, confirmed that gender was not a data field included in the algorithm. Nonetheless, the algorithm observed the historical pattern indicating that men are entitled to higher credit limits than women, and was able to infer the bias. Of course, it sparked an investigation from the state of New York's Department of Financial Services, Goldman Sachs, for violating the law and discriminating against women, whether intentional or not. The bottom line is it's an eye-opening use case where how the model can be biased, even if you purposely exclude problematic field. In this case, gender was excluded, but the training data that was used was incomplete. It did not include, it did not include the right set of data. So that's another example of how biases can come in. One is through training data, incomplete training data. The other one is, the inherent cognitive biases of a programmer, of the coder, of AI engineer who is writing these algorithms. And in case of neural networks, bias function is used to delay the triggering of the activation function. So it's an additional parameter that is used to adjust the output in a way it can best fit the data. right? So the next person that we interviewed is Krishna Chariot. He's the VP and Head of Digital Data and Analytics at Zotis. He's also the former CDO of Bristol Myers. The bottom line here is ethics in AI is everything. He advocates for a multidimensional strategy to have both responsible and innovative AI, being that you find the right opportunities where AI can be of value, and then how do you have the right experimentation mindset so it can prove its value. Secondly, talent development. It's not only developing talent, hiring the right talent who can write these algorithms, who can program these algorithms, who can scale it, but it is also enabling the knowledge workers, which is the larger employee population in the company, so that they can coexist in an AI augmented enterprise. They don't feel threatened by the use of AI. They're part and parcel of using AI as a company for the betterment of the company to reap economical benefits and societal benefits, building that trust and adoption across the company, across the employee base. AI is only good as its underlying model. If any bias gets associated with it, AI project is dead and unravel. It's up to the senior management and even to the board of directors to make sure that AI models are not unbiased. They are fair. The next one we interviewed is Rahul Basole. I think many of you are familiar with him. Academic, but he's now the managing director and global lead for visual data science at Accenture AI. So he takes it to the next level. Yeah, AI is not just AI, it's presenting, it's the storytelling, presenting those results in a visual manner, showing it visually so that it gets the right attention. It lets you explore contexts, right? While algorithms may replace certain processes and tasks, humans are still quite critical, and the ability to understand how algorithms and AI is designed and implemented can only augment the decision making, and that's amplified by the use of visual analytics. So how is it relevant? So trust, transparency, and explainability. We hear a lot these days, and according to the IBM survey, it's at the top of mind concern for businesses, with 84% of AI professionals surveyed agreeing that consumers are more likely to choose services from a company that offers transparency and an ethical framework on how its data and AI models are built, managed, and used. FTC is taking a hard look at it as well. They're warning businesses that selling or using such systems could violate federal law. There's also a lot of work that's going on in the world of standardization. ISO standard, the latest 2021 standard on artificial intelligence, is actually making an effort to articulate current best practices to detect and treat bias in AI systems or AI-aided decision-making, regardless of source. NIST, National Institute of Standards, is working with the government. Recently, National AI Advisory Committee was formed from an initiative act of National AI Initiative Act of 2020. It calls for the Secretary of Commerce and the Department of Defense, National Intelligence, and others in the US, brand new, and is tasked with advising the President and the National AI Initiative Office on topics related to National AI Initiative. There's also subcommittee of this approved by the Congress back actually a couple of months ago in October 2021 on the use of AI and in law enforcement. So there's a lot of work going on in this space as AI becomes more mainstream. So in other words, AI has potential benefits for business, but these will be realized only if people trust these tools to produce unbiased results. That trust originates within the company, making sure that your data science team is more diverse. There's a governance council at the company level made out of diverse people of different business backgrounds, different protected class backgrounds, so that you can run algorithms by them, making sure that it passes the smell test. By making AI systems more fair, we can also make our organization more profitable and productive. AI systems are just tools. They need to be designed to benefit humans, not harm them. And it's the responsibility of the leaders to ensure fairness by explaining how the model arrives at a particular recommendation. I know many times the algorithms are trade secrets, but they should be at least be able to pass through within the company's review boards for algorithms. I use the example of institutional review boards that are used in academics to get through a research project, making sure that it passes those ethical use of human subjects.
I just want to say we're at about 11 minutes.
Okay. And yeah, and the bottom line is the fairness has to be a conscious endeavor. And that's my last bullet. Thank you very much.
Good timing, Terry.
Thank you. Do we have a question that we want to sort of get on the table, or shall we hold till the end? All right, I didn't hear anybody jump up there. Thank you so much, Haroon. If you'd stop sharing, and I think Andy, you're up next.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. How do I share? Sorry, this is I don't sit in this software quite a lot.
Down on the bottom, there's a little green button.
Oh, I see it. Yeah.
Careful what you share, though.
Yeah, I have unfortunately, a lot of tabs open.
Andrew, be good.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Cool. Hello, everybody. My name is Andy Yu. I'm from Sandia National Labs. And today I'll be kind of talking about some of the work I did at the Z Machine to kind of help figure out how to better understand some of the experiments we run at the Z Machine, as well as to predict, how can we do better future nuclear fusion experiments. So I know everyone here is not an expert in pulse power technologies, so I'm gonna kind of go a little bit over the Z Machine itself, and then we'll kind of get into the meat of what I've done. So the Z Machine is a world-class pulse power facility, often used for a bunch of variety of novel experiments. Some of the experiments we perform are for fundamental sciences, such as understanding what's happening at the center of the sun, what's happening at black holes, stars far away. So this kind of ties in very well with the James Webb telescoping out in space and kind of deploying today. But some of the interesting things that we've done and discovered so far actually helped inform some of our theories about black holes, actually turned over some of the existing theories before. Some other stuff we do are initial confinement fusion, such as how do we generate more energy from fusion experiments or fusion fuel sources. Other stuff include radiation sciences, such as how much X-rays come off of the experiments we do, as well as dynamic material properties, such as what are new regimes materials can kind of enter and like how do they behave. So when we really look at the experiments we do, they're kind of at the forefront and the reaching edges of like what we understand about how materials work and how just kind of the world works. So a lot of the experiments we do are often one of a kind, and they're not repeated very frequently. And this can kind of make it challenging for some of the data analysis we do as a center. The way the machine works is that a lot of these experiments are loaded into, can you actually see my cursor or? Okay, so the experiments often load into the center machine at the vacuum section. And the way a pulse power facility works is that at the energy storage section with a little person for scale is that it will charge up the batteries or the MARXs. And what will happen is that they'll charge up all these batteries over, maybe like couple minutes, and then what happens then is that it will release all that energy in a specific pattern or timing, such that it actually compresses in time and space until it reaches the very center of the experiment. So we can kind of see we have a radius of 54 feet, but by the time it reaches the center of the experiment itself is about the size of a HDMI connector or roughly the size of an AirPod. So you can imagine just how much energy is traveling and being compressed all the way to the center to create these new environments and regimes that we don't commonly see anywhere else. So really, the way we've been doing it at the Z Machine is we've been relying on non-analytical strategies, really relying on subject matter expertise to kind of understand, okay, how is this experiment going to work out? How do we execute it? What issues can we expect to occur? And it's really kind of come from the idea that, well, we've been operating this environment that no one really studies, no one really fully understands. We had to bring in a bunch of subject matter experts from various fields just to get one experiment off. So to kind of give you an idea, the number of people in this photo is only a fraction of the people required to execute on a daily basis one experiment. And once that experiment is done, it's destructive testing. So once that testing is done, there's no data really to like do a post-mortem on. You have to rely on experts to kind of figure out from photos and things like that, okay, what happened here? How can we understand what can we do to understand what happened, as well as move forward from what we've learned. And this has led to a lot of issues where on more complex, nuanced shots, which is what we call experiments, it becomes very hard for these subject matter experts to figure out, okay, what can we look back to historically to kind of predict how it will perform in the future, as well as led to a lot of issues occurring over and over again. So there have been many cases where the same mistake is repeated over and over and over again. And this kind of has led to the same experiments having to be redone or really tossed aside and said, okay, well, we're gonna have to scratch this off this experiment. And the reason why I use the word shot here versus experiment sometimes is because the way we do shots is that sometimes we will put multiple experiments on a single shot. Because of the resources and time as well as manpower required to get a shot to execute, we'll often couple multiple experiments into one shot just to say, okay, well, I was able to execute, maybe 4 shots or 4 experiments in this one shot, but that increases the level of complexity that you have to deal with. So, like I said before, the types of experiments we do are often very novel and different. This is an example, a small snippet of the number of experiments we do. We all have heard of the adage of measure once or measure twice, cut once. Except the problem that we have at Z is that everything you measure and everything you cut is always different and at different points in time. So it's very, very difficult to say, okay, well, I have this training data or I have this set of data and I know what to do with it because it's consistent. There are some variables I can control for. How do we move forward with this? On the left here are just some of the experiments we can do. But if you look at them closely, they all are different and they're all slightly nuanced in different ways to produce different results, to explore different things for different purposes. And on the right are different diagnostic and measuring tools that we have to measure what happens from the experiment. And in each experiment, it's slightly different. Even when it's the same diagnostic or measuring tool, it's often put in different configurations. So it's even harder to measure then, okay, what am I using here? Because it's slightly different every single time. Like I said before, one of the biggest challenges we have is that we have destructive testing. So on the left is a picture of a brand new experiment just loaded in, ready to get shot. And on the right is exactly what happens after the experiment is completed. So it can be very hard to troubleshoot issues after the experiment's gone off or the shot's gone off, because there is nothing left to capture. To kind of give you an idea, the amount of energy released at the center of the machine is equal to a few sticks of dynamite. And when the experiment goes off or the shot goes off, there's many radiological and airborne hazards on top of the physical material hazards around us. So just getting in there and collecting and even sampling and looking for new pieces of data can be extremely difficult because of all the hazards that exist around you. So there's no going back to collect more data or review data. So what you have is what you've collected. And this is kind of giving an example of the shots that we talk about. we'll have different diagnostics, sometimes in different configurations and different numbers. And what I kind of looked at doing was, can we create some sort of feature vector of the diagnostic tools we have? Even though some shots have fewer or more diagnostics, they have different configurations of the same diagnostic. Can we just create this list of diagnostic tools or measuring tools that we have and see just how far we can get with that? That was extremely difficult to pull, not only because of the security questions that come from it in this environment, but also just the amount of data that people have collected over the years have been very varied. And the amount of information I can get from them is often difficult. But in the end, I was able to get, the shot ID as well as just diagnostic information. And from that, we were able to kind of create a matrix of just what shots are similar to other shots. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, but what we've learned is that even though we can see that over the years, the shots have grown increasingly complex because of the number of diagnostic used and the variations that they have. We see that some of them are actually very similar to other shots. So when we talk to experts who said, okay, well, this is not a simple or it's not a simple shot anymore. I don't know what this is similar to historically because it's so mixed and novel. I don't know what to look at. We can use what we've learned to say, okay, this shot that's upcoming in 2 years or 1 year or 6 months is actually very similar to these 10 shots that we've done historically in the last 4 or 5 years. And even if it's not 100% similar, we can say, okay, well, it's about 80% similar or some percentage of similarity, and say, okay, can we glean some information from that? If I give you a list of shots that we believe are similar, can you tell me what might be similar and what might be different? And can we work from that to figure out what operational efficiencies we can gain from that? What can we learn from a physics perspective from that? And I think the biggest
and
impact
Andy, I'll
we've
tell
seen.
you, you're at 11 minutes.
Okay. I think this is it. So I think the biggest impact we've seen so far was that we have been able to find a lot of successes in using the approach we took to figure out operational efficiencies. We're still trying to work towards more gains in the physics side, but that brings up a lot of questions about, well, how do we know the experiment was executed correctly? What we discovered was actually true and not just a fluke, especially when you're refuting long-standing theories in the physics world. And I think that's it.
Thank you. The chat took off, and so I know we've got some good questions there. Jim, do you want to raise anything now?
Just how are the sensors not destroyed during a shot?
Oh, they often are. We actually have a problem where we actually have to be careful about how we lay our wires. So at the center of the machine is where all the sensors are, and the signal, the wire that carries the signal goes to the outside walls, which is made of a special material to protect everything and contain most of it. But we actually have to be very careful about how we lay our wires and the pathing and everything, because the explosion that occurs happens so fast that it can actually cut off the wires before the signal reaches the wall and gets protected. Some sensors are made of a special material as well to kind of help protect it and help it survive long enough, or have multiple uses. But it becomes a very big challenge when you're trying to get very accurate results in very short time frames. When I talk about short time frames, I'm talking about like nanoseconds to collect data before everything is completely destroyed. So it's really like I guess another example is sometimes we will let off explosives because by time we'll trigger explosives to go off before the experiment begins, because the experiment can, by the time the experiment finishes, the explosives will close off certain valves and seals. But that's how fast the experiment goes. We have to release explosives even before the experiment begins to kind of give you an idea of how fast things progress.
Yeah, thank you. That has opened my mind to a new level of experimental complexity. I'm feeling like maybe I am in control of my studies a little bit more than I thought I was. Andrew, you're up next.
Great. Thanks, Terry. All right, can everybody see that slide deck there? All right, terrific. So thanks, Terry. Hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Harries. I'm a professor of practice in innovation and entrepreneurship at Simon Fraser University's Beatty School of Business. I co-authored this paper with Jack Newton, who's the founder and CEO of Clio, and also with Terry, our host today. Now, we wrote this paper. I think it's worth saying why we wrote this paper. First of all, we wrote this paper because COVID created the perfect lab experiment for how an existential threat to an industry changes its adoption profile or adoption readiness of digital transformation, and also how a vendor of digital transformation technologies can prepare for such circumstances. So it's an interesting story we thought we'd share with you today. So a little about Clio, first of all. It was founded in Vancouver in 2007 by Jack Newton and Rian Gavreau. Rian had worked in IT in one of Canada's largest law firms and saw that there were the incidence or the amount of time that partners were spending on administrative tasks in the legal space was suboptimal, and that there are many automations that could be created to relieve partners of that administrative burden. They established the firm, had a great deal of difficulty overcoming the conservative nature of the legal industry. Part of that search for product market fit led them to pivot to small founder-led legal practices. But it was still a struggle, which is not atypical when you are trying to create a new market or to dramatically change the way that your target industry automates itself. So they struggle for product market fit, they struggle for funding. They secured their first raise in 2010 and launched a search for the earliest adopters. And as I said, the focus at that time was on automating administrative tasks for these small legal partner-run practices. Fast forward to January of 2020, and we see that the company has made a good deal of progress with small firms, but they were still in very much the early adopter phase. If you think of your technology adoption cycle, they had secured approximately 150,000 very small law firms around the world with one or two partners. And the primary characteristics of these adopters were they were tech savvy, they were primarily younger practitioners. Again, the focus was still on automating legal administrative tasks. They anticipated at this moment in time that they would have a chasm ahead of them sitting between them and the majority market, which was very conservative and still very much focused on performing administrative tasks in a manual and in their opinion, suboptimal fashion. So the primary strategic challenge for them in January 2020 was how to make the jump over that chasm to start to capture customers within what they considered the majority market. And so they were making a typical move that somebody who's trying to educate a majority market would make. They were heavily involved in thought leadership efforts. So as you can see there, Jack Newton actually published a book entitled The Client-Centered Law Firm. He was heavily involved in industry efforts to modernize the legal industry, including sitting on a panel modernizing the court system in the state of New York. And Clio publishes annual legal trends reports, which have now become very popular within the legal industry. So this is a very common and savvy move in demonstrating thought leadership to a market as part of your education efforts. COVID changed everything. In the first quarter of 2020, the you-know-what really hit the fan for the law industry, and it came in the form of lockdowns, which were forced by COVID. The essential existential problem that small legal practices faced was they couldn't meet their clients because of lockdowns. So they were forced to figure out how to accommodate remote meetings, provide remote services, provide a way to remotely present, handle, sign, and archive legal documents without meeting their clients. And these urgent needs that the mainstream market, the majority market we're now encountering, created a heavy level of inbound interest from the majority market. And a wide variety of different types of firms and practitioners, not just the tech savvy. One of the things that Jack observed was sales cycles changed from 6 months to 2 weeks in this time period, which was absolutely astonishing for them. Now, there were some serious consequences of this happening. One was their product simply wasn't made at that time for the majority market adopter who wasn't very tech savvy. For example, you're telling clients, well, now download the app, and some people don't even have a smartphone. So it brought a lot of feature and product onboarding challenges to the customers they were now starting to sign up. So the first thing they did was they effectively blew up their 2020 product plan. They did a complete reset based on what their closeness to their customers led them to understand was now required. They dramatically simplified the product and the onboarding process and the user experience in general. They also integrated video services, document sharing, e-signatures, Google Docs, and other existing SaaS services that they could now plug into Clio to create a seamless combination for the remote law firm. One of the catalysts that really gave small legal practices permission, if you will, to adopt digital transformation at a dramatically accelerated rate was that courts adopted Zoom, and we're now hearing and judging cases via video, which was a sea change for the legal industry. And as a result of all of this, the legal industry saw what Jack calls 10 years of transformation in 1 year. And now what's happening is, with the adoption of these digital transformation services at a dramatically accelerated rate, firms of all size are seeing the ability to scale, to add staff wherever they can find them, for partners to be remote from their offices and service clients who never visit their offices. And as a consequence, the partners are enjoying more client time, less administrative time. And the last part of it is they're dramatically able to accelerate their billing and payment cycles. All these are classic characteristics of a digital transformation of a vertical market. So the lessons that we learned from observing what had happened here was that an industry's cultural resistance to change limits transformational pace. And so for those who are thinking of bringing digital transformations to a vertical market, you have to find early adopters and understand what the characteristics of that persona is. In this case, it was small firms headed by tech-savvy, relatively young partners. You have to educate through thought leadership. These activities, like writing books and writing articles and publishing papers, can accelerate awareness and adoption in your target market, but not by much. You really can't move a market. The market will move at its own pace based on its culture, how conservative its practitioners are, and you need to plan for ways to get over it. The third lesson is that customer intimacy, which is something that Clio committed itself to from the outset, and commitment to your customer's success, is a critical early warning system of when the dynamics of your industry that you're selling into are changing. and if there are disruptive threats that industry is encountering, the closer you are to your customers, the sooner you're going to understand that these threats are on the horizon, number one, and number two, how your offering to them should change to allow them or to help them to get through that existential threat. And the final lesson, as I mentioned off the top, was existential industry threats can come at any time, in any form, and they dramatically accelerate the rate of change. So that's our presentation. Thank you, Terry.
That's perfect. 11 minutes seems to be our going thing. Again, Jim and I are kind of pinging back and forth in the chat a little bit. It's amazing to me that we're seeing parallels across something coming out of Sandia and being very much about hard experimentation and explosive experimentation, and then this example in its much softer version has similar complexities. Right?
Well, this wasn't a destructive test.
Exactly. At least given we had a successful outcome, we know it wasn't a destructive test. All right, so I think we'll move on to the next. And
yeah, I think Andrew actually laid out a good introduction for my topic, digital transformation. Talked about legal, my study here, mostly on the digital transformation in the retail grocery business, which is powered by big data analytics. And to earlier point from Terry, actually, this is one of the areas where practice is much ahead. They're farther ahead compared to academia on what they're doing, what grocery industry is doing when it comes to big data analytics in the retail environment. Technology has powered it, but COVID, the pandemic has really accelerated some of these changes. This is, my own practical experience. I'm in the industry serving retail grocery customers, helping them go through their digital transformation when it comes to grocery pickup or general merchandise pickup and the whole things associated with it. Next slide here is, my co-author on this one is Dr. Pradeep Gopalakrishna. He's the Department Chair of Marketing at Lubin School of Business in Pace University in New York. He has over 30 years experience. Could not make it today. He's traveling, but he had to take an emergency trip to India. But his good wishes are with us here. So basically, companies are investing in big data analytics capabilities as they look for ways to understand and innovate their business models. As I mentioned, evolving customer attitudes, technological advances, and laser-thin margins on retail businesses, coupled with COVID-19, have driven digital transformation in the grocery businesses that have really taken, about 10 years ahead in the game of digital transformation. In this particular paper, specifically, I talk about the role of big data analytics of the top 5 US grocery companies in light of their digital transformation initiatives. So big data, again, the definition, it refers to data sets whose size and type is beyond the ability of traditional relational databases. They represent high volume, high velocity, and high variety coming through AI, mobile devices, social media, and IoT. Much of the data is generated in real time, in very large scale, whether it is data coming from the checkout counters, etc., coming from sensors, connected devices, video, audio, web, and social media. To process this data at scale and in real time to power decision-making requires advanced data technologies, which is the key component of digital transformation initiatives. Before I delve deeper into the practices of these 5 grocery companies, I want to briefly talk about how the modern digital grocery ecosystem works. This is the conceptual model that we put together. Basically, everything starts off with the digital consumer, where a digital consumer is shopping for groceries online. Some of the data tools there are digital cart, recommendation algorithms, etc. And then it goes through digital store operation, where the picking of the grocery items is an important role. So, 10, 20 years ago, it was centralized Walmart warehouses. Nowadays, local fulfillment warehouses, or, MFCs, local fulfillment stores, or in case of Target, they're fulfilled from the back of the store. So those are very micro fulfillment centers to pick and automate those grocery items. And once the consumer items are picked up, then the other mechanism here is the delivery. It's either customer goes to the store to pick up, what we call buy online, pick in store trending, or delivery mechanisms, which is DoorDash of the world, or self-driving vehicles. And then obviously customer comes in there, and then all this is made possible by the use of technology, particularly big data analytics, machine learning, AI, and the digital marketing initiatives. And some of those I'll talk about it. But this is the whole different value chain, not the value chain of 20, 30 years ago. The new digital grocery ecosystem is driving a lot of changes, a lot of technological investments that are needed to satisfy the customer. Again, our study sample was the 5 grocery companies: Walmart, Kroger, Albertsons, Target, and Amazon Whole Foods, which comprises of nearly 20,000 stores, actually more than 20,000 stores, with most of the revenue coming from here, and you can see the market share there. Let's go one by one. The Walmart's IRI lab, Intelligent Research Lab, is designed to test real-world applications of AI in a fully functional Walmart store that spans 50,000 square feet and sells more than 30,000 items. So the idea here is a digital twin. Through cameras, sensors, and predictive analytics, Walmart's goal is to automate much of the restocking process. AI is used to notify employees when new checkout lines grow too long. So they have these cameras at the self-checkout counters that does several things. The technology, basically, when the lines are too long, they can assess the sentiments of the customer so that they can send more associates to help. It also helps identify fraud in a proactive way. If somebody is not scanning, it can alert the associates so they can, and also it guides them through a process that can make it a little bit of a positive experience when dealing with situations like that. And simulations are used to manage the steps of a supply chain, route optimization, and also to make pharmacies more efficient, which is identifying the peak times and when the pharmacy associates are needed the most, kind of things. Coming down to Kroger, Kroger is actually doing much ahead. Their whole fulfillment center concept, which is hands-free, they are actually deploying in multiple cities. One of the things that they're working on is Smart Cart, which is using multitude of computer vision, sensing technologies, and AI algorithms to provide dashboard-like screen at the cart. And there they can deliver, it can deliver shopping list recommendation, promotional offers, wayfinding. They can scan their loyalty app, credit card payment, etc. Thereby, they don't even need to go through the checkout counter. The other thing they're working with Azure, Microsoft, is the connected store experience, which is basically a shelf. It's called Edge, enhanced display for grocery environment, that can indicate prices, promotions, nutritional content, and other information. Thirdly, visual AI technology to its stores to detect and reduce customer errors at self-checkout stations. And finally, they recently announced their 84.51 initiative, which is actually a subsidiary that leverages omni-channel data between stores and the digital, so that they can guide the CPG brands to better position their products with consumers, both in store and online. Albertsons, same thing. Cognitive services to transform the shopping experience by improving the ways to find the products and to reduce the wait times. The company is also collaborating with Bloomreach that uses AI-driven data to improve the online search experience, and Adobe Experience Cloud to harness cross-channel data. Target, it uses a slightly different strategy that startup accelerators, they acquire them to strengthen its in-house capabilities. They acquired recently Quantum, for example, that leverage their expertise to develop a machine learning algorithm that identifies complementary products to advertise on their web page. And we all know how Target figured out a teen girl was pregnant before the father did. That's, the big story from several years ago, by coming up with a pregnancy prediction score. Again, the story is several years old, but it's still an example of how data mining can really help retailers. Although they've come up with different ways of making sure that those kind of advertisements or personalization is not creepy, but nonetheless, it talks to the facts of the power of data analytics there. Amazon Whole Foods, again, you all know about Amazon, what they're using there. The recent one is the Amazon 4-star store, which they're opening new physical stores or a kiosk in big malls where anything that rated 4 or 5 and is trending on the Amazon website is being sold at these stores that you can go and pick up, in real time. So that's the power of how they're converging physical and digital into improving their sales. Again, major grocery retailers are implementing several ways to meet the demands of digital consumer to fulfill online orders and decrease the cycle time. Technology is a big role. Again, when I say technology, it's the data technology, including machine learning, digital twins, AI, also digital marketing to connect the consumer. It presents a significant challenges and opportunities in the very highly competitive, low margin grocery industry. And they are connecting these investments to consumer loyalty and ultimately to drive new business models, new revenue streams using data analytics and digital technology. So that's my
perfect timing. We're right at the 11-minute mark.
Yeah, right.
Well
Thank
done.
you.
I'm going to say that people are doing a great job of putting their ideas and questions into the chat. And so that'll at least make sure we don't lose those when we come to the big discussion. So Petri, do you want to go ahead and kick off?
Sure. So you guys ought to be seeing my screen now. Just
Yes.
nod if you are. Okay, so I'm presenting an interesting piece of work that we've been doing together with a couple of technology companies around YouTube channels and the way that we can analyze commercial collaboration attractiveness based on what we call micro-analytical content labeling and audience retention statistics. So in the spirit of the session, I thought I'd kick off in an unconventional manner and actually jump right into the practitioner implications first. Try to create a little bit of a practitioner perspective here. What I'm going to show you, I think, ultimately leads to the conclusions that media channel owners and influencers should always have a deep content strategy, because we see that retention statistics and their interpretation will drive them to cutting all kinds of collaboration and commercial content very short. So if you just go with what people want to watch, you're going to shorten everything, and then you have to have a deeper idea on how you're going to balance that out, and without a strategy, that's going to be hard. We also encourage, or our research encourages commercial content to be the content. So openly and willingly publish stuff that is commercially motivated, and that it seems to be that this kind of strategy of making commercial content, the content escapes this sort of traditional ad dilemma of how do you force people to watch ads in between TV shows, and how do you run ads so that they can avoid it, integrating it into the content, and also produce and publish openly commercially oriented content to also be able to analyze the reactions. So without publishing and doing commercially oriented content, you're not going to understand the full spectrum of consumer liking and what consumers really follow you for and like you for. For platform developers such as YouTube or others, our research indicates that this kind of tagging moments is a thing of the past. When commercials or ads or product placements used to be placed in moving image content, all this used to be very discrete moments where you then tag that and see how your tag is doing in a time slot. We also recommend that it's very important to understand whether the online viewer is not watching because they actually quit or actually skip. So do they skip forward and by those means don't watch something, or do they actually quit? In YouTube, for example, that's impossible-ish to understand right now. And then we say that this kind of automatic machine learning and AI approaches should be harnessed to provide this kind of micro labeling suggestions, and maybe even content could be created based on what the micro labels that you want to understand and have in your moving image content are. Then for marketers, we are seeing that enjoyable and marketing and business efficiency do go together. We say that this labeling can be a very good exercise for your customer community, and at the end of the day, marketers would be well advised to actually ask viewers and analyze how important is viewership versus the whole idea of customer retention throughout the video. Okay, so what we were motivated to begin this stuff was basically this paradox between the theoretical idea that online content made by us citizens or us users or us anybody here online in the internet should be favoring authentic non-commercial content in many ways. I'm not going to be a parrot and just start reading all the bullet points here, but there's this strong sociologically driven line of research that says that the online sort of internet democracy community idea favors the non-commercial, the sort of the unbiased, the reviewers, the people who don't take anybody's commercial perspective as their own. But in practice, we see a lot of developments that are totally contrary. We see a lot of marketer-driven content being published. We see that influencers are particularly because of their commercial collaborations, and they're also doing more and more commercial collaborations. And then we see that these third-party platforms like TripAdvisor or Yelp are not doing particularly well compared to, for example, Google, who as a search engine is now ruined. It's just an advertising platform, or to see what people are advertising with your search words, if you wish, compared to the Google that we had 10 years ago. But Google is still doing fine and people are using it more and more. So there's this paradox between these two. So what we did here as a part of this exercise is that we took a YouTube influencer-driven YouTube channel that hosts a competitive fishing show. So our case study here was a competitive fishing show where we had 25 different videos representing the episode, 17 different influencers, and we then partitioned the viewing moments into thousands of moments. And in this show, you had 5 different kinds of commercial content. So traditional sponsor announcements that we would see in any TV show or any well-produced sports show. Then live action product demos where you see the products being used by the sponsor named teams in the competition. Then the influencers doing their own product stories as a part of the show. Then inserts with in-shop shopkeepers presenting something that did well in the show, and then traditional these kind of sponsor-driven stories within the show. So we wanted to see if these commercially motivated and oriented contents within the actual competitive content and within the actual hobby content would show somehow to be inferior, or how viewership would react. YouTube provides you with pretty good statistics on audience retention to begin with. Typically, your audience retention panel would look like something like that. And for the interest of the research, we then slotted that into 100 different slots per episode, and then started analyzing, micro-labeling them by slot, also creating the audience retention statistics in a way that really shows the differences between the moments in the best possible way. And we're just going to run you quickly through how we did audience retention analysis. So first of all, analyzing paid and organic audience retention separately is very important, because the paid always acts in the same way, that the viewership is high in the beginning, and then since you're analyzing relative viewership between the moments of the, or you can do both absolute and relative, the relative looks silly if the viewership drops a lot in the beginning, as it does traditionally with all the paid advertising originated viewership. Duration does matter, so audience retention does go down if stuff is too long. These commercial endorsements didn't or don't decrease retention in general. So if you compare these more commercially motivated moments of different kinds to the show content, you don't see retention being dropped. Endorsements can actually be highlights. So we did see some moments be more popular and actually increase viewership and increase so that people would actually either start there, or they would skip until that came up, or they would otherwise not drop out as much as they would in other moments of the show. Endorsement types, yet with our analysis, we haven't found the endorsement types to be different. Only the duration has found to be mattering, but the popularity of a given episode seems to feed into the retention. So the popular episodes seem to suffer less from retention problems to begin with. What we also used here was content labeling. I'm going to give you some of the key takeaways here. First of all, yes, so subjective and objective content labeling should both be used. Defining the moment, what is the length of the moment that you use for analyzing this is very important. And we used everything from a couple of seconds to going to more like 40 seconds to going to more like when the picture changes, and started building the understanding of a specific type of a moment that we want to analyze, but we're not able to give you any prescriptions on what exactly is the right one. We just want to highlight that it's very important to spend some time on defining what the analyzed moment is. Obviously, when you label moments, there's a lot of research on how do you do that well. Just follow that research. You can enrich these retention statistics and content labeling with something that's already created automatically, such as time-stamped live reactions or customer comments that come into the feed when people watch the show. But also you could do automatic subtitling, use that as a automatically generated data source with timestamps. Eye tracking and physiological sensors could also go along with this kind of analysis of customer reactions. Then there's something that we came up with while doing this study is called second order labeling, meaning that when you do objective and subjective labeling of the moments, and I'll see you a labeling template as the last slide of the presentation, we were highly motivated to then find early on in the labeling work something that seems to be interesting and seems to work well, and then we get a lot of labels on that topic, and then we recommend a deeper second order labeling. So you do a more fine-grained labeling exercise on the most interesting first order labeling subjects or topics. I'll show you in a minute what I mean by that. And then finally, engaging viewers for labeling seemed to be a very good idea here. So particularly the subjective labeling benefits from the actual customers and these YouTube communities and online communities around shows and influencers. You always have that online community, and these kind of people follow that person or that show or that channel for a reason, and they are more than interested in actually commenting on what the show should be like. If everybody has an opinion about a TV show, and now that it's that TV show's community online easily be reached, and you can do a survey with an experiment that can be done. So this is just the microanalytical labeling template that we used as the final slide of the presentation. Some objective labels, some subjective labels, and then as this instructiveness was the highlight of the subjective labels, then we used these 6 different, more theoretically motivated labels to analyze more deeply on which one of these things might actually then work in retention with respect to the retention statistics. And that's where we are, and are going to continue this research, combining the labels to the retention statistics as we are looking at it right now. So that's the presentation, and thanks for watching.
Well, thank you so much. And if you'll stop sharing, I'll put up the list of all the talks. Okay. Oops, not yet. Let's stick to discussion first. Wonderful news. So we have, let's see, we're at 9:11 and I'm trying to remember. So we've got a fair amount of time for discussion. So let's kick off. If I look at the chat, it seems like there were, some specific questions, and then there were ones that were more systemic, but I'll just, we're a small group. So why don't you just unmute yourself and ask your question? Now, Utpal, I know you had a question for Petri. Do you want to go ahead and just ask?
Sure, thanks, Terry. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, I just had a quick question for you, Petri. Great job, great presentation. We're just curious, how would you adapt that to different countries, languages, different viewing patterns and behaviors of customers, right? Because if the answer is we'll have to do the learning each time, then it becomes a very cumbersome exercise. And on the other hand, it's just not easy to plug and play, because what's working in US may not work in another country, right? So just curious on your thoughts on how you plan on scaling it.
Yeah, you're completely right about that. And I think some of the objective criteria and some of the objective labeling can be automated pretty easily and will be universal. But you need to use a lot of AI to be able to then spin out any sort of working programmatic way of coming up with the subjective labels, which is a cold start problem for any algorithm, right? Or then to be able to even test out the ones that are popular somewhere, or are labels that suit the analysis of some content in some culture to other cultures. Something that does help, though, I think, is that these kind of subject areas are very important parts of the recommendation algorithms in YouTube. So fishing in Finland versus Hawaii versus the US versus India versus Japan is not that different, because it's fishing. And we know that these sort of hobby centricity, or what some people called verticals, 2 or 3 years ago, there was a lot of hype about verticals. The cultural variances within the verticals between countries is not that high. So I'm counting on, interior design being fairly similar globally, fishing being fairly similar globally, music being fairly similar globally. And maybe that alleviates some of the cultural problems that we are for sure going to see in the way that these things should be analyzed and then algorithmatized, if you wish.
And just one more question, maybe I wasn't paying full attention, but let me just ask it. In terms of data privacy, you're not getting into that area, right? I mean, you're trying to stay away from that realm, because once you start accessing personal data in YouTube, et cetera, to refine it further, it then starts crossing certain boundaries, right? So you're just keeping it one level high, correct?
Most definitely. And this kind of, the depth doesn't come from plugging into people's private data. the depth comes from involving your customer community to express their subjective views. And tapping into the voluntary, the perspective that people have on how each moment should be labeled, gives you finely grained, personalized, subjective, interpreted, and also a lot of data points, right? And that's like this kind of willingness first versus like I'll steal your data first kind of approach.
Thank you.
I'm going to use the fact that I own the slides and ask Haroon a question. You talked about, I'm not sure if you guys are, I had do not disturb on and the call came through anyway. Haroon, the question about the grocery store, you opened with it being a case where practice was clearly far ahead of the academic work. Do you have any insights where you could help the academics catch up? You know, what's going on there? Do we need to be better partners, or is there something the academics could do on their side? Can you give us a little bit of an insight and perhaps hope for the future on that one?
Definitely. I mean, that's, being in this industry, I see it firsthand. I think Practitioner, this is one of the best mini track series because it kind of tries to handle that kind of situations where there's a gap between research and practice. I'm saying industry is ahead mainly because of some of the companies like Amazons of the world, or some of the newer startup companies. Take for example DoorDash or Instacarts of the world, right? They are taking some of the academics from the universities to do their development of AI or some of those, research oriented, especially, if you look at Instacart, for example, Instacart, when you compare to Walmart and other companies, they have their own customers' data. But Instacart, because they're delivering to multiple clients, whether it is CVS or whatever it is, now they have across the consumer data. So they know what you're ordering from where much faster than any one retailer would ever understand. So they're taking some of the academics and actually developing those models that kind of tells us that, this research is it's advanced. It's not like academics are not doing this research. It's probably more so that they're being advanced further in the practice, in these new startup companies, new tech startup companies. The other thing is, they have a lot of money, and Wall Street is willing to spend a ton of money on these new tech startups that is revolutionizing the industry. And that disruption was very much needed in grocery. I mean, if you look at grocery, it's 2% gross margin business, right? And if the traditional grocers continue to do what they're doing, they will not survive, especially when the tech startups like DoorDash and Instacart come in, completely disrupt the new workflow. So yeah, I think more funding probably, and the pace of that research should be much, much faster. Right.
And let me take on one of the ethics questions that I think came up, in your first talk, and I think in some of the other issues. I will say that in my own work, there is no way my ethical review board would ever let me do the research that is done inside those organizations. And so maybe that's going to be something that really deserves some attention, in that, the academic side can't compete. And in fact, if I were to follow every rule, I couldn't even be inside the organization and be privy to that data. And, and I'm not saying that in any kind of a normative way, but just acknowledging it as a constraint that I hope we find a way to solve, because
right. That's a good concern. I mean, yeah, you're a little bit more freer in the industry, especially in the AI field, because it's a new startup. But even there, the industry is catching up, right, with the standards, with the certifying agencies coming up where it's not just US, actually Britain and Germany, they are making much progress here also, where your algorithms are actually going through a third-party independent organization to get validated, making sure that it's certified, algorithms are certified, that they are free from biases to the extent possible. So there are some actions. So there is going to be a lot more curtailing happening in the industry, maybe not to the extent of academia, which, you know, I know it kind of slowed things down, but industry is farther ahead in the newer technologies, mainly because there are no regulations yet, right? Especially when it comes to AI and some of those cognitive sciences, but it is coming up. Maybe, you know, your point is valid that academics are probably hand-tied on some of that research, but at the same time, when it comes to digital technologies in these growth areas, I still, from my own experience, that I feel that those concepts are less studied in academia.
Yeah, and I know Andrew, I don't think Jack's on the call with us, but one of the things that enables Clio to provide such service to its customers is the fact that it has access to, you know, their client data, their payment data, and all of that.
I was going to add to Haroon's point. I agree that the ethical standards to which the academy is held are generally more restrictive than in industry, but in industries where the data is. I mean, you know, and I think the practitioners will get further and further ahead on these particular topics because they have data.
They have real data,
and they have very little incentive to share real-time contemporary data, if you will, with academicians. I know, because this data's the new oil, and they're not going to be giving it away to those of us who want to do our own research on it until that data is aged.
All right, I know we had questions for Andy, and kind of, you know, the chat conversation was around, here's an example of things that have, you know, sort of fact in the physical world, the speed of the electrons, you can somewhat manage that. A question I had for you, Andy, was around on the human side of that. So as you're bringing together these experts and they can say, you know, yes, we have to design it in a different way to make sure that that signal gets through before it's destroyed. Have there been parallels? That's a huge group of people having to come together, and as you said, from very different tribes. What kinds of insights have you been able to either draw from the physical world or from the human world that enables you to do the work that you're doing and try and improve on that knowledge management task that you've taken on?
I guess, can you reframe the question a little simpler for me? Sorry.
Oh, no worries at all. As I was thinking about it, I was going a little bit off topic. So you have a setting where some of the work that you're doing is very much set in the physics, the reality of the world. And then we don't yet have a good understanding of the physics of the human change at any kind of, you know, micro level. And do you think in your instance where you're trying to learn from all these past experiments and trying to learn how to better bring together the different tribes to manage the complexity that has increased as your experiments have gone on over the years, do you see, I guess, similarities and differences in how you manage the change on the engineering side versus how you're managing the change on the human side, given, as we looked at that picture, you have a very large set of folks having to come together on this. And I'm just looking for any parallels or differences between managing the engineering and managing the human, and maybe what those of us who sit on one side or the other could learn from that.
Yeah. So I think The engineering is a little bit easier, especially when I present some of the numbers and some of the data out there. Some of the things we've seen is that, you know, by figuring out what experiments, what shots are similar, and bringing that to engineering, they can start reusing a lot of their work. And of course, you know, I'm not their manager. I don't dictate what they do, but providing that insight of saying, hey, here's what you can see, what we found, and you're free to do what you want to do, but we're seeing a lot of similarities in this. So instead of having to say, well, this is a very brand new and novel experiment that's never been created before, we can say, okay, well, it's very similar to these experiments we've done historically, and this is how we've modified them or combined them to say this is now a new thing. So it's almost like I guess the most simplest way that I can think of it is kind of like a genetic algorithm where we're seeing like things mix and match and kind of create new things coming out. From the physics side, or at least the I guess not the physics, the people side, it's been a little bit harder, and that still remains a challenge. Especially talking with some of the managers of these groups, it can kind of be hard to kind of get them on board with some of our findings and some of our discoveries. And it's been taking a lot of effort to try to break down some of the ideas and theories, as well as the results we've had, to kind of help push for a change in the way we do work. A lot of the managers still prefer working with these huge groups of people, even during COVID days. They still prefer working with large groups of people versus looking at some of this data. And it comes down to them being unsure of whether or not the information we're finding aligns with what these SMEs that have been here for, you know, decades, right? Like these are SMEs in pulse power physics on the leading edge for decades, and they've been here for a long time, and they want to get their input on it, and they rather have that huge powwow versus saying, okay, well, the data says we only really need these few SMEs to kind of get insight on what's going to happen, and that's been kind of difficult. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And I am watching our clock. And so what I'd like to do now is hand it over to Anat from Mint.io to hear about our Best Paper Award. Anat.
Thank you, Terry. I'm really excited and happy to be here, and I've enjoyed the presentations tremendously, as I'm sure we all did. This was so fantastic. I'll take a minute or two to say a few words about myself and about Mint.io, so you kind of understand the framing of this. And then I have the privilege and honor to announce the winning paper. So really, really excited about that. I'm Anat. I'm head of academic partnerships at Mint.io, and I'm also a university professor, an adjunct professor at Reichman University in Israel. I've been teaching for, I think it's 20 years now, and I've been walking this fine line between academia and practice and, you know, and industry life. And Mint.io, and I'll share a slide or two just to kind of show you guys what this is about. You can see my screen, right?
Yes.
So Mint.io is an online discussion board, but it's quite a unique one. And listening to you today presenting the papers, it all kind of came together for me because Mint.io is an AI-based discussion board. It's fantastic. It's fantastic in the fact that it uses AI in what I think is the best possible way to encourage better analytical skills for students, deep discussions, and holistic assessment that is AI enabled. And I think that the main part, and this is to me is key, because the AI-based assessment that Mint does really looks at some elements that other platforms are struggling to look at. May it be collaboration between people or students on the platform. I should have said Mint.io is used by many, many universities around the world. It's the main market that we have, because somehow, and this will not be a big surprise to all of you, in academia, there's a lot of, it's a fantastic field to have in-depth learning and knowledge development. And Menti.io does that because as a discussion board, it encourages in-depth conversation between members of a team, which are usually students in a particular course. Menti.io is deployed in many universities around the world and also many disciplines within these universities. So we see many instructors in business schools, in medical schools, in engineering, sociology, all the social sciences. So particularly impressed by the fact that this knowledge creation is being done by collaboration that is enhanced by the AI. I think that this tie between industry and academia is also felt by the fact that Menti.io, and this was mentioned here, so I want to reiterate that, the fact that if a startup company like Menti.io shares, and we do share our data, anonymized data, but still data, with leading universities to conduct research on, it is very much up-to-date data, contemporary data, right? And that leads to really groundbreaking research. The most recent is a research done by Wharton and Stanford on Menti.io data. So really, really fascinating things. And I'm really happy and thankful for the opportunity to share this with you. I want to thank Terry and the committee for inviting us to be here today. I think this event is absolutely imperative for everything, for the creation of a better industry and better academic approach to the industry. I think it's extremely important. And I really hope to see you guys in person next year. It's, I think we're all we're really happy. I mean, it's so convenient to meet on Zoom, but it's so much better to meet in Hawaii or any other exotic and nice location. Terry, before I present the award, is there anything else that I left out? I'm just overwhelmed by all this amazing information that we just digested. Anything else that I should have said?
I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I hope that you can get all your collaborators to submit to this track next year. That would be a huge benefit of this meeting. But let's do the big reveal.
Let's do the big reveal. Are there drums?
I wish.
We should. So I again want to say congratulations to all papers presented and to all papers submitted, really, for fantastic work, and to announce that the winner of Best Paper Award is the paper titled Analyzing Commercial Collaboration Attractiveness in YouTube, based on all the things that we just saw. So congratulations, Petri and the team. Wonderful. Well done.
Thank
Way to go,
you.
Petri.
Ah, you came dressed for the event. That's fantastic.
Waving the flag, waving the flag.
Oh.
Thanks very much. Very appreciated. Goosebumps.
Oh, so well deserved. And we will be in touch with you. There is a financial reward that comes along with this. And so we'll work out how to get that to you and your team. I will just say thank you so much. Thank you, Anat. Thank you all of ISSIP for coming together and supporting this track. And yes, may we all be safe and come together in Hawaii next year. Please share the kind of track that this is. It's unique. We have to get a very specific set of reviewers to understand our approach. And we look forward to working with you all next year. And I'll have the recording posted on the ISSIP website fairly soon. I want to cut out kind of the early part of things, make it be a little bit more professional. All right, thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, and congratulations, Petri. Well done.
Yep. Thank
Thank you
Terry.
very much. Thank you all. Good seeing you.
Good job.